Canada just walked away from $61 billion. Not because they couldn't afford it, because they decided American money came with a price they were no longer willing to pay. And what happened in the 72 hours after that decision could quietly reshape every military alliance on the planet. If you've been following this series, you already know this story has been building for months. Drop a comment right now. Did Canada make the right call? I want to see where you stand before we get into what actually happened. Here is what the headlines skipped. In February, Ottawa and Washington signed what looked like the most significant bilateral defense agreement in North American history. 47 billion Canadian dollars. F-35 Lightning II fighters. Halifax-class frigate upgrades. Ground-based interceptor missiles, all flowing to Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and General Dynamics. Every dollar was supposed to go to American manufacturers. It was designed to be the model of how allies are supposed to work. Then, Trump went to Davos. He introduced what he called the Golden Dome, a continental missile defense shield modeled on Israel's Iron Dome, but stretched to cover every inch of North America from Alaska to Newfoundland. He announced that Canada's fair share would be $61 billion US. That's 83 billion Canadian, more than triple the annual defense budget Canada had been debating for a decade. Mark Carney was also at Davos. He gave a speech that drew standing applause across Europe. He condemned what he called economic coercion by great powers against smaller nations. He never said Trump's name. He didn't need to. If that speech sounds like a man drawing a line in the sand, that's because it was. Like this video if you want to understand what that line actually costs, because the number coming up is one most defense analysts are not talking about publicly. According to Trump's economic advisor, Scott Bessent, the White House believed the speech was a mistake. Within 6 weeks, every contract from February was cancelled. The cancellation arrived at the Pentagon on April 19th. One page, 114 words, drafted personally by Carney's office. It read, "We are pursuing alternative procurement strategies consistent with Canadian sovereignty and industrial capacity. No apology, no negotiation, no phone call, just a page." Here is where it gets complicated, and this is the part nobody is explaining clearly. Canada didn't cancel the spending. They kept every dollar and redirected it. 47 billion, same amount, same timeline, not 1 cent to an American company. Saab in Sweden will now build Canada's next generation fighters, the Gripen E instead of the F-35. BAE Systems in the United Kingdom will refit the frigates. Thales in France gets the radar contracts. $6 billion goes into expanding domestic Canadian manufacturers like CAE and IMP Aerospace. And every single contract now includes what Ottawa is calling a sovereignty clause, a legal guarantee that no foreign supplier can cut off parts, software updates, or maintenance based on political pressure from Washington. Think about what that clause actually says. It says, Canada looked at what happened when Turkey bought Russian missiles and got ejected from the entire F-35 program. It says, Canada decided it was not going to build a military whose own switch is held in another country's capital. That is not a procurement decision. That is a declaration of a new kind of independence. But here is the problem that no press release mentions. NORAD exists. The North American Aerospace Defense Command is a binational operation, but the United States funds 80% of it and holds operational control. When a bomber crosses into Canadian airspace, the response is coordinated through American networks. American radar, American satellites, American software architecture. And that architecture was built around American hardware. A former NORAD deputy commander told Defense News directly, "If we can't coordinate response in real time, that's a mission failure." Mission failures in air defense cannot be fixed after the fact. Canada currently operates 76 CF-18 Hornets. Most are more than 35 years old. Only about 50 are flyable at any given time. The fleet was supposed to retire in 2025. The cancelled F-35 deal would have delivered 88 jets starting in 2027, with the first full squadron operational by 2028. The Saab Gripen deal now being negotiated delivers 65 aircraft, 23 fewer, starting in 2029, 2 years later. For a country with the second largest landmass on Earth and a military with a 47% readiness rate, that gap is not an abstraction. It is a window. Trump responded on Truth Social 3 hours after the announcement. He called it a massive mistake. He said Canadian jets would not integrate with NORAD systems. He said the United States might reconsider certain defense commitments, 3 American flag emojis. But here is what his post ignored. The Gripen E is built to NATO data link standards. Sweden, which only formally joined NATO last year, has been running joint exercises alongside NORAD aircraft since 2012. The technical compatibility question has an answer. The political compatibility question does not. Because the real issue isn't whether the Gripen can talk to American radar, it's whether the Pentagon will allow it to. NORAD's architecture runs through American systems regardless of what flag is printed on the airframe. Buy European fighters, the United States decides if they plug in. Build domestic radar, the United States decides whether it shares satellite data. Sign a sovereignty clause with Saab. The software still leads American networks to defend the continent. The equipment changes, the architecture does not. And the architecture is the only thing that matters when the threat is real. This is why NATO is watching so closely. A NATO official told Reuters the alliance is monitoring the situation carefully, and the concern is not political, it is operational. Canada's defense pivot, if it succeeds, gives every NATO member a new question to ask. Why buy American if European alternatives work within the same framework? Poland is watching, Japan is watching, and so are Beijing and Moscow. Not with concern, but with something closer to satisfaction. Because what Trump's transactional pressure is producing is exactly what years of Russian influence operations have failed to produce. Fractures in the architecture of Western alliance. The difference is Moscow used propaganda. Washington is using invoices. Here is what we know for certain. Canada rejected $61 billion in American defense funding. It redirected $47 billion to European and domestic suppliers. It announced $70 billion in new procurement over the next decade. Not a single American company made the list. NORAD commanders are on record expressing concern. The jets Canada is getting are fewer, arrive later, and are less stealthy than what was cancelled. And here is what nobody knows yet. Whether the Pentagon quietly ensures that Canada's new jets cannot handshake with American radar. Whether Carney's sovereignty clause survives contact with a defense architecture that is American at its core, regardless of who builds the hardware. Whether any other ally follows Canada's lead or watches safely from a distance while Ottawa runs the experiment. $61 billion offered, $47 billion cancelled, $70 billion redirected. And the one thing no dollar figure can purchase, the permission slip from the country that controls the architecture of continental defense. We update this story daily as it develops. The question I want you to answer in the comments is the one that cuts through all of it. If you were Carney, do you take the $61 billion? American money, American jets, full NORAD integration, but you know that every dollar deepens the dependency you were elected to end. Or do you do what he did? Pay more, wait longer, get less, and bet that real sovereignty is worth the operational gap? Tell me below. This debate deserves more than a headline. If this breakdown gave you something the daily news cycle missed, share it with one person who's been following the Canada-US story. And if you want analysis like this delivered before the headlines catch up, subscribe. We don't do weekly roundups. We track it daily because in geopolitics, 24 hours changes everything.